Imagine a phone ringing in the dead of night, echoing through an empty trading floor in London's financial district. It's September 16th, 1992, and that single phone call is about to trigger the most dramatic financial battle in British history. On one side stands George Soros, a brilliant investor with an audacious plan. On the other, the mighty Bank of England, guardian of the British pound and symbol of national pride. What happened next would send shockwaves through the global financial system and permanently change the face of currency trading forever. Picture this. In just 24 hours, one man would orchestrate a financial move so bold it would force the Bank of England to admit defeat, cost British taxpayers billions, and earn him the nickname, the man who broke the Bank of England. But this isn't just a story about money. It's a tale of hubris, power, and the vulnerability of even the mightiest financial institutions. Before the sun would set on September 17th, interest rates would skyrocket twice in a single day. Political careers would crumble, and a nation would watch helplessly as its currency plummeted. The events of this day would later be known as Black Wednesday, but to understand how one investor managed to outmaneuver an entire nation, we need to unravel a story that begins in the ashes of post-war Europe. This is the incredible true story of how George Soros saw what others missed, a perfect storm brewing in the heart of Britain's financial system, and turned it into a billion-dollar opportunity that would make financial history. They say markets are built on two fundamental emotions, fear and greed. But on that fateful September night, George Soros was about to demonstrate a third far more powerful force, conviction. And the Bank of England? They were about to learn a brutal lesson about the true power of the free market. The story of how George Soros brought the Bank of England to its knees begins not in the gleaming towers of London's financial district, but in the rubble of post-war Europe. Picture a continent devastated by conflict, desperate to ensure that such destruction would never happen again. The solution? Money, or more specifically, the intricate web of financial connections that would bind European nations so tightly together that war would become unthinkable. By 1979, Europe had emerged as an economic powerhouse, but it faced a persistent challenge: 9 different currencies, fluctuating daily, making trade as unpredictable as a game of financial roulette. Imagine a French businessman never knowing how many German marks his francs would buy, or an Italian manufacturer struggling to price products for the Belgian market. Europe needed stability, and their answer was the exchange rate mechanism, the ERM. Think of the ERM as a sophisticated dance where every currency had to move in perfect harmony with the others. Each currency was allowed to move up or down, but only within strict limits, like dancers tethered together by invisible strings. It was an elegant solution, at least on paper. But there was a catch, and it was a big one. Every nation's economy moved to its own rhythm. Germany, with its powerhouse manufacturing sector, stepped to a different beat than Britain's service-based economy. It was like forcing a ballet dancer and a break dancer to perform the same routine. Enter Margaret Thatcher, Britain's Iron Lady. She saw what others refused to acknowledge, that forcing these different economies to move in lockstep was like trying to synchronize different heartbeats. "You can't buck the market," she warned, her voice echoing through the halls of Parliament. But by 1990, even she couldn't resist the political tide pushing Britain toward this European dance floor. The timing couldn't have been worse. Britain waltzed into the ERM just as its economy was stumbling into recession. Imagine trying to join a high-stakes poker game while your pockets are already empty. The Bank of England now faced an impossible choice. Either keep interest rates painfully high to maintain the pound's value within the ERM, or help its struggling economy by lowering them. It couldn't do both. This was the weakness George Soros would spot, like a master chess player seeing a fatal flaw in his opponent's defense 10 moves ahead. The British pound was caught in a trap of its own making, and Soros was about to spring it. But first, he needed to wait for the perfect moment, when the pressure would become so intense that the entire system would crack. As 1992 dawned, Britain's economy was gasping for air. Unemployment had soared to nearly 10%. House prices were collapsing, and still, the Bank of England stubbornly defended the pound's position in the ERM, like a captain going down with his ship. All Soros needed now was a catalyst. One piece of news, one moment of weakness, and he could unleash a financial tsunami that would make history. The stage was set for what would become known as Black Wednesday. The only question was, who would blink first? The brilliant speculator who saw the inevitable, or the centuries-old institution too proud to admit its vulnerability? The answer would soon send shockwaves through the global financial system and change the way we think about the power of financial markets forever. While Britain slept, George Soros was watching. From his office in New York, he had spent decades mastering the art of spotting economic fault lines, invisible cracks in financial systems that others overlooked. The British pound was his next target, and he was about to execute what many would later call the trade of the century. But who was this man preparing to challenge the Bank of England? Born in Budapest, surviving Nazi occupation, fleeing communist Hungary, Soros had learned early that even the most unshakable systems could crumble overnight. By 1992, he had transformed himself into a Wall Street legend, known for an almost supernatural ability to predict market breakdowns. His quantum fund had become the equivalent of a financial sniper rifle, small, precise, but devastatingly effective. In August 1992, Soros began his opening moves. Like a master chess player, he started quietly, almost innocuously. First, $1.5 billion worth of pounds borrowed and sold. It was enough to test the waters, but not enough to raise alarms. The Bank of England, confident in its position, barely noticed these early transactions. After all, what was $1.5 billion to an institution that had weathered financial storms for centuries? But Soros wasn't just selling pounds. He was laying a trap. Each time he borrowed and sold sterling, he was essentially placing a bet that the pound would fall. The more it fell, the more he would profit. But he needed other players to join his game. Like a conductor preparing for a symphony, he waited for the perfect moment to signal the start of the performance. That moment came on September 16th, with an interview that would change financial history. The president of the German Bundesbank gave what seemed like a routine press statement. To most, his words about currencies coming under pressure were forgettable diplomatic speak. But to Soros, they were the starting gun of a financial marathon. As Europe prepared for bed that night, Soros's team sprang into action. Phone lines lit up across the globe. Each call had the same purpose: borrow pounds, then sell them. By dawn, they had assembled a financial weapon of mass destruction, $10 billion worth of sterling, ready to be dumped onto the market. Think of it as a financial tsunami, with waves of selling orders about to crash against the shores of the British economy. Meanwhile, inside the Bank of England, no one yet realized that the next 24 hours would become the most dramatic in British financial history. The defenders of the pound were about to face a test unlike anything they had prepared for. In the coming hours, they would be forced to make decisions that would affect millions of lives, all while racing against time and a market that was rapidly spinning out of control. The stage was set for a financial duel of unprecedented scale. In one corner, the might of the British financial establishment, armed with centuries of tradition and billions in reserves. In the other, a brilliant speculator who had spotted their fatal weakness and was prepared to exploit it without mercy. The next 24 hours would determine not just the fate of the pound, but the future of European monetary policy and the very notion of what one person could achieve in the global financial markets. Dawn broke over London on September the 17th, 1992. The traders arriving at their desks had no idea they were about to witness financial history. The first warning signs came as subtle ripples, unusual selling patterns in Asian markets, a slight weakening of the pound. But within hours, those ripples would become a tidal wave. 8 a.m. The morning calm shattered as trading screens across London blazed red. Soros's $10 billion bomb had detonated in the currency markets. Imagine watching a year's worth of normal trading happening in minutes. The pound was bleeding value, and every trader in Europe could smell blood in the water. 8:40 a.m. Inside the Bank of England's imposing walls, emergency meetings erupted. The first counterattack, £1 billion thrown into the market to prop up the currency. It was like trying to stop a flood with a paper dam. The money vanished into the market without making a dent. The pound kept falling. 9 a.m., 2 billion more pounds committed to the defense. Gone in minutes. By now, Soros's initial attack had sparked a chain reaction. Every major financial institution in the world was joining the feast. selling pounds as fast as their computers could process the trades. The Bank of England was no longer fighting one man. They were fighting the entire global financial market. 11 a.m. The first signs of panic emerged from Downing Street. John Major, the Prime Minister who had staked his political reputation on maintaining the pound's value, faced an impossible choice. His weapon of last resort: interest rates. With a single announcement, Britain's interest rates jumped from 10% to 12%. In normal times, this would be economic suicide. These were not normal times. 12 p.m. The market's response to the interest rate hike? A collective shrug. The selling intensified. Currency traders could sense victory was near. Inside the Bank of England's trading room, the atmosphere was electric with desperation. Billions in foreign reserves were evaporating by the hour. 2 p.m. A second interest rate hike, this time to an astronomical 15%. Imagine the implications. Mortgage payments would skyrocket, businesses would struggle to borrow, the recession would deepen. But the bank had run out of options. They were throwing everything they had at the problem, and still, it wasn't enough. 5 p.m. The final hours of the battle felt like watching a mighty oak finally topple after a day-long assault. Despite spending £27 billion, enough to build 400 new hospitals, the Bank of England had failed. The pound was in freefall. 7:30 p.m. The surrender came via a somber news conference. Britain was leaving the exchange rate mechanism. The pound would be allowed to float freely, ending weeks of desperate defense and decades of economic policy. In less than 24 hours, one of the world's oldest and most respected financial institutions had been brought to its knees. As night fell over London, the full magnitude of the day became clear. George Soros had made $1 billion in profit, roughly £15 from every man, woman, and child in Britain. But more than money had been lost that day. The myth of central bank invincibility was shattered forever. The global financial markets had proven they were more powerful than any single government. Yet in the ashes of this defeat lay an unexpected phoenix. Freed from the ERM's constraints, Britain's economy would soon soar to new heights. The day that seemed like a national humiliation would later be seen by some as Britain's economic liberation. Black Wednesday had turned into White Wednesday. But that was a plot twist no one could have predicted in the chaos of that September day. In the immediate aftermath of Black Wednesday, Britain looked like a wounded giant. The pound had plunged 15% against the German mark and 25% against the US dollar. Political careers lay in ruins. The Bank of England's reputation for invincibility was shattered. But sometimes, defeat carries the seeds of unexpected victory. What happened next would stun even the most seasoned financial observers. Freed from the golden handcuffs of the exchange rate mechanism, Britain's economy didn't collapse. It soared. Like a sprinter finally released from running in lead boots, the British economy found its natural rhythm. Interest rates fell. Businesses began to breathe again. Exports surged as the weaker pound made British goods more competitive globally. The real irony? George Soros, the man villainized as the Bank of England's executioner, had inadvertently done Britain a massive favor. By forcing Britain out of the ERM, he had accomplished what no politician dared. He had liberated the British economy from a system that was slowly suffocating it. Within 5 years, Britain entered what would become its longest period of sustained economic growth in modern history. 16 years of prosperity that would have been impossible under the ERM's rigid rules. But the reverberations of Black Wednesday echoed far beyond Britain's shores. In the marble halls of central banks worldwide, a chilling realization took hold. In the modern era, no government, no matter how powerful, could stand against the tidal force of the global financial markets. The age of absolute central bank authority was over. For Soros, the billion-dollar profit was almost secondary to the lesson he had taught the financial world. Markets are not just mathematical equations. They're reflections of human psychology, of our fears, our confidence, and our breaking points. He hadn't just beaten the Bank of England, he had exposed the fundamental flaw in any system that tries to artificially maintain prices against market reality. Today, 3 decades later, the echoes of Black Wednesday still resonate through the corridors of power. Every time a currency comes under pressure, every time a central bank faces off against market forces, the ghost of that September day looms large. The questions it raised remain hauntingly relevant. How much power should any institution have over market forces? When does stability become a straitjacket? And most importantly, who really controls the global financial system? Perhaps the most lasting legacy of Black Wednesday is this. It marked the moment when the world truly understood the awesome power of financial markets in the modern age. In a matter of hours, one man with a clear vision and iron conviction had forced one of the world's most powerful nations to change course. It wasn't achieved with armies or political might, but with the simple act of seeing what others refuse to acknowledge, that sometimes the emperor really isn't wearing any clothes. As for Britain, what seemed like a disaster proved to be a blessing in disguise. The country would go on to enjoy years of prosperity, remaining proudly independent of the euro currency that would later cause its own crises. Black Wednesday had transformed into White Wednesday, a painful but necessary awakening to economic reality. In the end, this isn't just a story about money, markets, or even George Soros. It's a tale about the danger of fighting market reality, about the price of pride, and about how sometimes our greatest defeats can lead to our most profound victories. As modern markets face new challenges and uncertainties, the lessons of Black Wednesday remain as relevant as ever. No institution is too big to fail, no market can be controlled forever, and sometimes, the most profitable trade is simply being right when everyone else is wrong.